Herzliya Conference. Special interviews, highlights, and live broadcasts on IDC Radio.
And we're here with the Professor Alireza Nader, Senior International Policy Analyst from RAND Corporation. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Thank you, my
pleasure. First of all, is it your first time at the Israeli Herzliya Conference?
My very first time in Israel, actually.
And what do you think about this conference till now? Was it interesting?
It's been very interesting conference, very good speakers, some really good insights on Israeli politics, because I don't follow Israel as closely as Iran and the rest of the Middle East, so it's been very helpful for me.
So we'll ask you a few questions about Iran,
Sure.
Not about Israel. Recent rhetoric coming from Iranian leadership shows a potential unwillingness to give up on major issues of their nuclear program that are sticking points to world power. In your opinion, Professor, should Israel fear comments that come from the Ayatollah?
Since the election of Hassan Rouhani as Iran's president in June of last year, Iran's approach on the nuclear negotiations has changed. This is really a lot to do with the sanctions pressure against Iran. The economy has really suffered, and President Rouhani, when he campaigned, promised better living conditions for Iranians. And also, the Islamic Republic has felt the pressure of sanctions. So that's why we see a new approach from Iran on nuclear negotiations. And so far, the Iranian government has shown a willingness to compromise on nuclear issue. Of course, we're not at a final deal that is being negotiated, but the P5+1, the UN Security Council plus Germany that is negotiating with Iran, expect very significant cutbacks in Iran's nuclear program. And so we'll have to see what the final deal looks like.
Well, in your opinion, what is the main issue Israel should be afraid of in the Iran regime?
Well, I think a good deal that's signed between Iran and the P5+1 will allow very intrusive international inspections of Iran's nuclear program by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The P5+1 also expects Iran to modify the Arak, the city of Arak, nuclear or heavy water plant, for Iran to cut back on its centrifuges. So if Iran undertakes those actions, and the international community can verify that it's not moving toward nuclear weapons, I think such a deal is not just good for the United States and the P5+1, but for Israel as well. So we have to see if the deal is satisfactory, if it's a good deal. Based on the interim agreement in Geneva, Iran has taken steps that really limit its nuclear program. And it's gotten rid of its highly enriched uranium, for example. It's allowed the IAEA to come into its facilities every day. So we expect more of that sort of behavior. And ultimately, that will help very much contain Iran's nuclear ambitions.
And more about this deal, Iran is signed to the NPT and thus is obligated to certain guidelines. Right. Recent history has proven that they are not meeting their obligation under those guidelines. So, in your opinion, is Iran really obligated to stick the negotiations with the P5+1?
Well, it is obligated to be transparent about its nuclear program and intentions under the NPT. And this is an issue the international community has with Iran. It has been very secretive. It has not disclosed its nuclear activities in the past until they have been revealed by other parties. And so, yes, Iran is a signatory to the NPT. However, its secretive actions raise the bar in terms of its compliance with the NPT. So the P5+1 expects much more transparency than it would from any other NPT member.
And maybe to the end of this interview, over the next decade, in your opinion, where will Iranian domestic, regional, and global policy and strategy move toward?
Well, that's a very good question. It's hard to predict the direction Iran will take. Hassan Rouhani, the president, does have a genuine interest in decreasing Iran's isolation, improving relations with neighboring Arab states, and also improving relations with the United States. However, Rouhani is not the only or most important decision maker in Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, is more powerful. In Iran, the Revolutionary Guards exercise a lot of power, as do conservative clerics. So the foreign policy is not entirely in Rouhani's hands. On the issue of Israel, the Rouhani government's rhetoric on Israel is different than the Ahmadinejad government, his predecessor. We don't see Holocaust denial. And the Rouhani government, I think, has pursued a pretty savvy public relations toward Israel. But that doesn't necessarily mean we'll see significant changes in Iran's policy toward Israel because, again, it's in the hands of Ayatollah Khamenei and the Revolutionary Guards. In terms of domestic politics, Rouhani wants to improve the standard of living in Iran, to improve the economy, to decrease social repression, to loosen restrictions on the internet and the media. But conservatives in Iran are very worried about any sort of loosening up because their worry is even if they loosen things up a little bit, the entire system might lose control of the public. And there's a lot of public dissatisfaction in Iran. We saw it in 2009 with the Green movement and the mass protests, and that hasn't really gone away. So Rouhani wants to decrease restrictions, and the conservative establishment is very nervous about that.
I think that's a good point for us. Professor Alireza Nader, Senior International Policy Analyst from RAND Corporation. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.